They would meet in dreams. Helios had lost his rightful place in one afternoon, but he did not mind. This fact shocked the gods, who passed judgment upon the Titan, deeming Apollo the new keeper of the sun. Helios had worked his whole life from a young age, protecting the sun and working as a shield for the daughter of the moon. She slept and woke each day due to her curse. After all he had given, he was cast aside. He was left with his powers, however. Why was Helios not shocked about being stripped of a job that he had given his youth to? Helios was a dreamer. He had not only inherited his father's powers of light, but also his mother's powers of prophecy. He did not know this fact, however, and called his visions dreams. For 5 years now, he had been dreaming of a beautiful woman his age. The dreams were always unique, and he had grown fond of seeing her. He would wait with anticipation as he waited for his sister to wake up so that he could sit and dream of her. When his sister would arrive at dawn to wake him, he would trudge himself to his position. Though Helios was the energy that kept life on earth growing, he never once sought praise or reward, and even when leaving his dreams was hard, he never complained. He was content with the hours that he could dream of this beautiful woman. As time went on, he began to notice slight changes in his dreams of her. The once vibrant colors started to fade, and her laughter became a faint echo. Despite this, he still cherished every moment he spent with her in the realm of dreams. Helios knew that one day he would have to let go of these dreams and face reality, but for now, the allure of her presence in his subconscious mind was enough to keep him going. He held on to the memories of their dream adventures, knowing that they would always be a part of him, even after he stopped dreaming of her. These dreams began with a sudden introduction. Helios stood in a misty field of lilies and trees as tall as newborn titans. It was the same dream that he has had every night since he was 2 years old. He had had this dream so often that he knew this forest like the back of his hand. Having the power to travel the earth and realms, he had seen every forest that there was to see. So he thought. He had never seen this forest in real life, and so he deemed it a figment of his unstable imagination. Like every night, he would slowly traverse the acres of the forest, using his energy to grow the flowers around him. The trees refused to grow. He would always manage to grow an array of flowers before he was swallowed up by a great darkness. Like that, he would wake up and start his day. But that night, the night when he met her, was different. There were stars in the once bleak sky, and the trees were now the size of a teen titan. The air was not biting, and the flowers were not wilted. Helios spots a trail of light and begins to run at a tremendous speed. Finally, he reached the end of the mysterious light, and there she stood under the moonlight by a stream that he had never seen before. Her beauty took his breath away as he approached her cautiously, unsure if she was real or just a figment of his imagination. But as he drew closer, he could see the sparkle in her eyes and the warmth of her smile, and he knew she was no mere illusion. She reached out her hand to him, inviting him to join her by the stream, and as they sat together in the moonlight, Helios felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over him like a wave. The darkness in his eyes began to fade away. Her long, black hair danced to the beat of the wind. That was different too. The wind had always been still, but tonight it was not. Helios could feel dawn quickly approaching, and sadness overtook him too. He had sat by the stream next to her the whole night in silence. She did not speak, and he did not know what to say. Every so often he would feel her gold eyes gazing upon him, but he was not brave enough to look upon her for fear that his illusion would leave as suddenly as it appeared. "Helios, that's my name," he says as he fades into the darkness, a sign that dawn is finally upon him. She did not say anything. That day, Helios spent the most of his time thinking about the pleasurable nightmare that he had. He was hoping that he could have the same dream again. Sunset quickly approached, and he found himself dreaming yet again. Like the night before, he noticed subtle yet noticeable changes. There were now berries of every kind and a few rabbits. He ran even faster than last night, hoping to see her at the stream, but she was not there. Disappointment engulfed him. He hears a rumble, and suddenly a mountain emerges from the ground next to the cliffs. He looks up to find her perched on the cliff. He jumps with great force and gently lands on the cliff edge, where she had been sitting. Again, they spent the night in silence. Each night, Helios would find her in different places, his dream growing each night. Like that, a year went by, and now, within a year, where desolate fields once stood, was now replaced with the humming of animals. The growth of every plant he had ever seen, all in one location, shocked Helios pleasantly. Even more magical all in one environment. As the days passed, Helios found himself eagerly searching for her in the new surroundings each night, their silent connection growing stronger with each encounter. The once desolate field had transformed into a vibrant oasis, teeming with life and beauty. It was as if their shared presence had brought about a miraculous transformation, making their meetings even more enchanting and mystical. The bond between them deepened, their unspoken connection weaving a tapestry of wonder and magic into the lush landscape they now shared. Yet still, she would not speak a word. Helios did not speak either, but at least she had heard his voice once. He yearned to hear her. It had quickly become apparent to him, however, that all she knew to do was smile and nurture. He would follow her wherever she would sit and gaze every night. To Helios, she seemed like a god, gazing upon her creations and taking pride in the fact that she had breathed life into them. Life for Helios continued like that for another 3 years. 3 years of silence. He had never felt more comforted. He had often felt alone before meeting midnight, the name that he had given her in his mind. His yearning one day led him to speak to her once more. "What is your name? Can I know just that, please?" He asks in anticipation. "Ophelia, Ophelia is my name, Helios." She replies with an even brighter smile. Helios already knew that he was madly in love with his dream, but hearing her voice made him fall even harder. To him, Ophelia, his midnight sounded sweeter than a hummingbird. He couldn't believe that he had finally found someone who understood him without uttering a single word. Ophelia's voice was like music to his ears, filling the void in his heart that he never knew existed. With every conversation, Helios felt like he was getting closer to Ophelia, even though she was just a figment of his imagination. But to him, she was as real as the air he breathed, and he knew he would do anything to keep her in his life, even if it was just in his dreams. Helios grew to hate the coming of dawn. The conversations they would have every night were one sentence each, and they ended with her brushing through the fields as though Helios were not in her presence. Helios found out in 6 months that her name was Ophelia. She was only 20 years old, whereas he was 25. She loves lilies of all colors. She was no titan or god, for that matter. She would often reply to his more intimate questions, such as, "Where do you go when I leave?" with, "This is but a dream, Helios, precious Helios." Being called precious was enough to silence him forever. A week before he was stripped of his position, Midnight had said, "Precious Helios, Lux will consume you." She did not say much more that week. After that, it was common for her to remain silent for longer. Helios had gotten used to her indifference. She was but a dream after all, his Midnight. Helios spent that week contemplating what she meant at first, but soon realized that the only other being that could be called Lux was Apollo, the god of the light. What hurt him more, he thought, was the fact that those he gave up his life for would do this to him. Apollo is strong enough to protect his sister, Selene. Eos also knew of Apollo's power and in many ways respected him. The issue, therefore, was not that he felt that Apollo was not deserving of taking his place, but that he was so easily replaceable. It only took one day and one night to prepare himself, waiting for the news of when he would be made to step down. He did not know exactly when, but judging by the behavior of the gods, who once smiled at him whenever he would provide them with light to guide their way, the time was soon approaching. His chariot or winged horses, when needed, turned into a tattoo on his chest whenever he would utter Hyperion. The gods could not simply take his powers away, for he had broken no divine or earthly law. Helios saw no point in returning to his golden palace. It made him dismayed to think of returning to such riches and luxuries. To him, the idea of staying in such a home felt like he would be role-playing a titan. What was his plan, you may be wondering, if he refused to go back to his own home? Helios, though not the most powerful titan, had a tremendous amount of power. He had so much power that even Zeus and Odin feared that if he turned like Cronus, he too could do a great deal of harm. Both would often seek the guidance of Gaia, who was born of chaos. Gaia, Zeus commanded, tell us how to make the sun obey. Though I am the mother of all, Phaeton is no child of mine. He is of his own creation. She replied, angered by the presence of Zeus, the god who betrayed her. Odin finally speaks, also tired of Zeus and his behavior. Though I consider myself wise, I still seek your advice. You are the only one free from his flames. If advice is what you seek, mighty Odin, then advice is what you shall receive. The price? Zeus asks with an air of arrogance around him. Nothing is what I want from you, Zeus, god of poison. A day of your life, Odin, is what I seek. Just one of your precious days. To a god who had lived almost as long as she had, it was no problem to give up. It was but a day in his eternity, and so Odin agreed. Neither gods knew what Gaia was planning, but they had come to her expecting to give up something great. To the god who does not die and can never die, rid him of his followers and replace his stories with the triumphs of another hero. Gaia advised, must you speak in riddles? Zeus retorts, she speaks of no riddles, Zeus, but has shared great wisdom. Replies Odin, so, the scheme was concocted. Zeus would spread tales of Apollo through the human world through whispers of the wind, and Odin would manipulate the minds of all things living in the universe to believe that Helios was too weak. The scheme they both decided was bound to work as the humans were malleable. A god with no followers was easy to remove from power. A god with no followers cannot claim any glory. Months later, the gods called a meeting of the Titans at dawn, knowing that his sisters would not be present to defend him. As the Titans gathered, Zeus and Odin presented their evidence of Apollo's strengths and followers. The other gods murmured in agreement, swayed by the whispers of the wind and the manipulation of Odin. Helios stood alone, feeling the weight of his isolation and the power of the scheme against him. With a heavy heart, he realized that his time as a god was coming to an end, all because of the cunning plans of Zeus and Odin. He stood his ground and showed no emotion. A god must keep his pride, he repeated to himself countless times. Helios, exclaimed Hermes, I come bearing news. As Helios stood at court in front of all the Titans and gods, the pain of betrayal plagued his mind. There stood Hermes, whom he had once helped. Zeus, whom he obeyed without question, even put his sister in harm's way by not rising for 3 days so that he could fuck a mere human. Hercules, who tried to kill him, still helped and praised him. Even Perse, the god that he cherished the most, looked down upon him with no pathos in her gaze. With each flashing memory, Helios thought to himself that he had been far too generous. He lacked the ability to be selfish. It was not within his nature. The kindness with which he had gifted all these gods only wounded him in the end. Most of them would have perished long ago, if not for Helios. Helios finally speaks, and the room falls silent. To those who wish for my downfall, I will be generous enough to fall graciously. Apollo is much deserving of such a job, and so I shall walk away without a fight. My only wish is that he guards my sisters well, for if harm befalls my sisters, humanity will pay the price for having sinned and cursed my sister, who only holds love in her heart. My only sin, I dare say, is being too full of unbreakable kindness, a kindness that ends today. I wish for nothing more. Apollo, may the day serve you well. Helios turns around to Apollo and taps him on the shoulders. Apollo frowns in disappointment at Helios' lack of reaction. The gods broke into an uproar at the fear that Helios had renounced them and kindness. A few realized their mistake as Helios ascended into the sky. The rest cheered and applauded Apollo for his accomplishments. Helios, now free of all burdens, sent doves to deliver the message to his parents and sisters about what had happened. At long last, it was time. With his fading dreams, he had hoped that he could live out the rest of eternity, finding a way to conjure more dreams. Using his manipulation magic, he morphed into a star and took rest in the sky. Ophelia! Helios shouts as he emerges within his dream, seeing nothing but darkness. As he emphatically shouts her name, glimmers of light begin to emerge. Ophelia is standing by the lake where they first met, undressing. Helios shies away but keeps approaching, realizing that the closer he gets, the further the image of her retracts. He stops in his tracks, and Ophelia turns to face him. She looks him in the eyes and drops her nightgown from her shoulders to the ground. Stepping out of the pool of clothes, she removes her underwear. Helios could feel his dick stiffen. He is filled with guilt for the thoughts that walked through his mind. Ophelia displaces her long black hair from her shoulders to reveal her breasts. Helios attempts to approach once again, unable to control his urges. He calls out to her once more, and in the illuminating light of the twilight, she walks towards him, her usual gentle smile fading away and leaving behind a blank expression. Her ethereal beauty rivaled the stars above. "This is no dream," Ophelia says, placing her hand on Helios' chest. He grabs her hand and pulls her closer. "If this is a nightmare," Helios replies, "then I have no wish to end it." With a gentle touch, Helios lifts Ophelia's chin, drawing her even closer to him. She seemed to be still bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. To Helios, Ophelia looked more serene than an angel. He places his lips above hers, and when she does not refuse, he brings her into a passionate kiss. Not knowing where to place his hands, he grips her hair gently. Ophelia begins to fade into the moonlight, and Helios is almost brought to tears. He had finally lost it all. He looks around to find himself surrounded by darkness and an ominous silence. The darkness seemed to swallow him whole, engulfing him in a void of emptiness and despair. Helios had never felt so alone, so lost in his own thoughts. He was torn between holding onto the memory of Ophelia and letting her go. The weight of her absence pressed heavily on his heart, leaving him gasping for air in the suffocating stillness. Desperately, he reached out into the darkness, hoping to find some shred of comfort or solace. But all he found was the cold, cruel reminder of a love lost to the unforgiving night. Ophelia stands on the edge of a small cliff with her eyes shut tightly. With all her might, she makes a wish to the night sky. "I wish my dreams would come true," she eagerly wishes. A voice in the distance shouts, "Ophelia, hurry. Let's go. We're done taking pictures." She turns around to see that it was her cousin, who had already walked a distance between them. She begins to run towards him, keeping perfectly balanced. "Let's go," she adds. "I am sure Grandma is waiting with her slippers by the door to turn the key upon us." As they run through market stores and people, Ophelia repeats her wish for her dreams to come true. Ophelia reaches the hotel where they are staying, and as expected, her grandmother is waiting for her. "I always knew you two wanted me dead, coming home at such an hour," her grandmother yells, throwing the cloth that she had been holding in their direction. It hits her cousin across the face, and Ophelia holds back her laughter. "Jester, are you okay?" she asks, holding back her laughter. Ophelia, her grandmother Maeve, her cousin Jester, and her grandfather Axel were all on a family trip to Rhodes. They had been there for a week and would soon return to Denmark. She had discovered that cliff one day on her way back from the beautiful beaches and now frequented it at sunset to make a wish. It was her last night there, and she wanted one last try at making a wish. In the dead of the night, she sneaks off by herself to the beach to see the stars once more. There was a particularly bright sky, which she loved to wish upon. She takes a seat in her usual spot and gazes at the still sea when suddenly a bright light is reflected on the waters. A shooting star, she thinks. She makes another wish. The light gets brighter and closer. Suddenly, the ground trembles as the glowing star hits the sand. Ophelia instinctively runs towards it. She finds a person lying where her star should have fallen, and she approaches, asking if they were okay. She turns the person around, and in shock, she backs off. It was the man that she had dreamed of every day for 5 years, since her 20th birthday. He opens his eyes, and a confused Ophelia approaches once more. The man called out, "My midnight." She takes the hand that he had stretched out to her, and they are both enveloped in light. Ophelia sees darkness, and she can feel herself losing consciousness. A distant voice echoes, and both Ophelia and Helios wake up, taking note of each other's presence. They are still by the seaside, but to Ophelia, it was unfamiliar. "Where are we?" she asks in a shaking voice. "Rhodes, of course," Helios replies. The confusion was enough to make Ophelia lose her mind about what to say next. The earth shakes, and a beastly hound emerges from it, a distance away from them. Helios gets to his feet and pushes Ophelia away. He charges at the demonic creature, shouting, "Hellhound! What? Why?" He strikes at the creature with a glowing fist, and it is pushed into the water. The beast regains its footing and is now walking on the surface of the water. In shock, Ophelia begins to run. Helios senses the immediate danger and charges at the demon once more before it takes an interest in her. The demon shatters to pieces, turning into blue dust and fading into the waters. The waters begin to foam, and a dark light, darker than the current night sky, rips through the water. A figure begins to emerge from it. It flies towards Helios, landing in front of him and shrinking as he does so to human proportions. It was a man in a dark robe, ancient to Ophelia's eyes, normal to Helios. "Cousin." The voice resonates. "What a pleasant surprise, Helios. My hounds sensed that a life was about, something that did not belong. Had I known sooner that it was you, I would not have allowed them to leave." Helios stands there in silence, still shocked about what was going on. He races towards Ophelia, ignoring the presence of the man in front of him. He checks to see if she is unharmed and hugs her tightly. Ophelia accepts the embrace, unable to move or refuse due to his overwhelming strength and the pure fear that she is feeling. He turns to speak to the man who was walking towards them with an amused look on his face. The man begins to clap arrogantly, his smirk getting bigger. "You truly are a brave one, Helios," the man says, his voice dripping with condescension. "But unfortunately for you, your little display of defiance has put you both in grave danger." Helios glares at the man, his protective instincts kicking into overdrive. He knows they are in a dangerous situation, but he refuses to back down. Ophelia, still unable to move, looks up at Helios with a mixture of fear and gratitude in her eyes. The man's smirk fades as he realizes that he may have underestimated the determination and bond between these two. As the man gets closer, Helios finally recognizes his face and voice. "Hades?" he asked, though he already knew the answer to his question. "Yes, cousin," Hades replies. Hades rarely left his kingdom out of hatred for Zeus, and when he did, it was for a scheme that exceeded that of what his other cousin Zeus could ever come up with. Hades always left a morbid taste in his mouth, but unlike Zeus, Helios knew that whatever question he asked would be answered honestly, for Hades was unable to lie. "I have been asleep for many twilights, and when I last counted, the year was 2000. But now I open my eyes to be back in my present, cousin. What is going on?" Without hesitation, Hades crouches down to meet Helios and Ophelia and begins an explanation that leaves them both equally confused. He told a tale of their grandmother Gaia, the same person who helped Zeus and Odin, granted Ophelia a wish, her one and only wish. A wish granted to a soul so pure that it had merit even to the arrogant gods. "How do you know of these facts, cousin? Why do the dead tend to whisper?" "The dead?" Ophelia is more terrified than ever. The girl speaks. She is wonderful. "You girl, yes, you wish to have your dreams come true. And you, Helios, wasted your eternity away amongst the stars." Gaia, who felt guilt for what she did to her grandson, granted his first true love a wish. "No, no, I am going back to Denmark tomorrow. I need to return to Grandma. She will be worried." Ophelia leaves Helios' grip and begins to run towards what she assumed was the hotel. "Leave her only son of Thea. She needs to see the truth for herself. You know that I cannot willingly cause you harm, cousin." Helios watches her run with a heavy heart, knowing that Hades cannot harm mortals. He also had the strength to take on any harm that might fall on her. As Ophelia's figure disappeared into the distance, Helios felt a sense of unease wash over him. He knew that Hades was a formidable force, one that could easily manipulate and deceive mortals. As Ophelia reaches where the hotel should have been, she is greeted with trees, rocks, and more sand. She falls to her knees and screams in horror, eventually losing consciousness. Helios flies over and picks her up. He gently cradles her in his arms, his face etched with worry and fear for Ophelia's safety. The realization that Gia may have played another cruel trick on him fills him with anger and determination. Helios flies back in the direction of his palace, determined to confront Gia and make her pay for his deceit. As Ophelia stirs in his arms, Helios whispers words of reassurance and promises to protect her from any harm that may come her way. As he flies off, he turns to Hades, whose smile had turned into a frown, and warns him, "Keep away, Lord of the Unseen." Hades watches Helios disappear into the distance, a deep scowl etched on his face. He knows the power that Gia wields and the danger that lies ahead. As Hades looks at the unconscious form of Ophelia, he knows that he must find a way to protect her from the impending confrontation. With a heavy heart, he prepares himself for what may come, steeling his resolve to stand by Helios' side even though it was clear that Helios did not yet believe in him. Hades, after all, always garnered fear, not belief, and so he was willing to wait for the truth to unveil. Ophelia had known fear. She had watched both her parents take their own lives from a young age. But the fear that she currently felt while standing in the Palace of Gold was not known to her. Run, hide, or scream. She did not know what to do. Helios approaches her with much caution. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to control her breathing. The luxurious surroundings of the palace seemed to suffocate her as she tried to make sense of the situation. Helios, with a look of concern in his eyes, reached out a hand to help her, but she shrank away, unsure if she could trust anyone in this unfamiliar place. She knew she had to make a decision quickly, but the weight of her past experiences clouded her judgment. "Ophelia, my midnight, fall asleep. I need to know, please." Helios snaps his fingers, and a golden bed appears in a gust of smoke before them. Ophelia thought that he was truly insane. She had lost her will to fight. It was true that she was no longer in the roads that she knew. Her grandmother was not waiting to lock her up. Her grandfather was not there to tell one last joke before bed. And her cousin was not there to make her do and say stupid things. Her whole life so far flashes through her head as she decides that submission is her only means of survival. She climbs onto the bed. She had lost everything. So what if her first true love wanted to take advantage of her? She lays there, waiting for Helios to proceed with his plans. Helios begins to sing a sorrowful lullaby. She fades into a deep sleep, tears dripping off her cheeks. Helios' voice eventually fades away as she drifts into unconsciousness, his haunting melody echoing in her dreams. In her vulnerable state, she feels a mix of despair and resignation, wondering if she will ever see her family again. As she falls deeper into sleep, she holds on to the hope that one day she will escape this nightmare and be reunited with the one she loves. Despite her fears and uncertainties, she clings to the belief that there is still a glimmer of light at the end of this dark abyss. Ophelia opens her eyes to see a familiar black forest with nothing but desolation in its wake. "I stayed here for millions of years, waiting for you, Ophelia. I truly thought that you were a dream, a figment of my last hopes. As I slept in the stars, hoping that I could dream of you again, I was forced to descend to the earth." Ophelia begins to walk in silence, and as she does, the death around her begins to resurrect. Helios walks behind her, his head down, trying to conjure up the correct words to explain to her. "Ophelia," Helios calls out quietly, "you're in my past and your future." Ophelia pauses in her tracks and looks up at the cloudless sky. She waves her hand, and stars suddenly appear in the bleakness. Helios continues to realize that she will keep her covenant of silence. "This scar on my cheek, I thought it was from the fight with the hound, but I looked closely as you slept for a week straight. It is the same scar that I got when the Protector of Dawn slapped me for being late to twilight. If I'm 5 years younger, that makes me 20 by human years. 5 years ago, I met you by that lake over there, and I named you Midnight. You called me your precious Helios." Ophelia walks in the direction of the lake, things dying in her path as she walks. "Control your emotions, or you will kill us both." "How? Tell me how so that I can kill us both." She falls to her knees, the things she brought to life dying, and the stars crushing to the ground in massive boulders. "Ophelia, my Midnight, please listen. This is not you. Ophelia, once, long ago, I would share every part of myself and not look back. I lived to serve mankind, though they helped to betray me. I gave even more to the gods, and they threw me aside out of fear. But years before they did this to me, I met you. Yes, Ophelia. Helios takes her in his arms, stroking her dark hair to the rhythm of his beating heart, hoping to calm her down. I fell in love with you. Only you. I have seen the world and more, but you, Ophelia, you are the only being that I could only see in my dreams. You spoke no words and stole my heart. My crown is yours, Ophelia. Helios reaches into his chest, and a glowing white light appears, followed by a golden crown, more golden and magnificent than anything at the palace that Ophelia had seen before. Ophelia, my midnight, will you be my queen? My grandmother always said that madness was a disease that affected everyone, but I never knew that even God could be this mad, she says, pushing him away violently. If you wish to sleep with me and kill me, just ask Helios. Ophelia's words hurt Helios more than she could ever know. He had poured his heart out, something no proud Titan had ever done. What's more, he was willing to give up his crown. To a Titan, their crown was their life force. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you always. Ophelia's heart ached with conflicting emotions. She had never experienced such raw vulnerability and devotion from anyone, let alone a god like Helios. In that moment, she realized that her grandmother was right. Madness truly did affect everyone, even the powerful and immortal. Despite her anger and fear, Ophelia felt a glimmer of hope and maybe even a touch of love for the god standing before her. She knew that she had to say something, but tears were all she could create. Helios walks to the water and taps on its surface. An image appears. It is he who sits in the same dark forest, unmoving, unchanging, and stagnant. Ophelia looks at the reflection and finally sees that he was telling the truth. How could he have brought her there if he himself was trapped in his own self-made prison? You are not a dream. Ophelia is now calming down. As she comes to terms with the reality of the situation, Ophelia's mind races with questions and possibilities. How could she have the power to bring someone from the past into the present, then to their past, her future? And why would Helios, a being trapped in his own stagnant existence, show her such kindness and affection? The realization that their connection transcends time and space fills her with a mix of wonder and trepidation. Despite the uncertainty of their circumstances, Ophelia can't deny the deep bond that exists between them. It is a love that defies logic and reason, but one that she knows she cannot ignore. I do love you, Helios. I do, but what of my family, my present, your past? Saying all this out loud only made her tired of her own dreams. Helios had a look on his face that said I would work this out, and she decided right there and then to believe in him. A crown was too much for her to accept, however. She accepted his love without the crown and his marriage without a throne. Helios had never seen a human untouched by greed before, and that made him love her more. How do Titans get married? Ophelia asks. Helios' face turns crimson red as he avoids Ophelia's gaze. Titans and gods get married in a very interesting way that we can talk about later. Helios answers, still flushed red by the ears. I'm not a child. I'm from the future. I know what Titans, gods, and humans do. Ophelia says, pushing Helios to his limit, his eyes widening with embarrassment. Hold out your hand, Ophelia, Helios asks gently. He takes her hand and starts to whisper ancient words, a language that she had never heard before. A tattoo of a sun starts etching on her right wrist, but she feels no pain. She looks up to see that Helios' deeply blonde hair is turning black by the tips, a shade identical to her hair. Helios releases her hand, and she picks up strands of her hair, noticing that the tips of her hair resembled Helios' blonde hair. We are marked for life. Any god or titan that sees you will know that you are mine. We can get married the human way if you want, but for now, I'm going to bind you to me. Helios whispers more words, and a lily appears on his neck. He leans in to kiss Ophelia, who was simply watching attentively. Dawn will soon approach. I need to guide my chariot across the earth. Stay in my palace. Help yourself to what you need. I'll be back before midday. Helios turns to leave, and Ophelia feels a pain in her chest. She decides to also leave the dream. By the time she is back in reality, Helios is gone, and she is left in a giant golden prison that Helios called a palace. With a heavy heart, Ophelia looks around the opulent palace, feeling trapped and alone. She wanders through the halls, admiring the golden decor, but feeling a sense of unease. As she explores, she wonders if Helios will truly return as promised, or if she is now truly imprisoned in this beautiful but lonely place. Ophelia can't help but wish she had never left her dream. Ophelia, not knowing what to do in Helios' absence, decides to simply sit and wait. So she waited. Time passed by slower than her grandfather making lunch, she thought as she laughed to herself. She recalls her family and the little that she left behind. Tears stream down her eyes as she mixes pain with laughter. Ophelia had seen a lot in life, including the loss of her parents. They had given up their lives to save hers for reasons that she had never comprehended or wanted to comprehend. Her life had never seen bliss, but she had never made suffering her uniform. She had always tried to find moments of joy and laughter, even in the darkest of times. Ophelia knew that she had a strength within her that had carried her through the toughest of days. As she sat there, waiting for Helios to return, she found comfort in the memories of her family and the love that they had shared. And though tears fell from her eyes, she knew that she would continue to persevere, just as she always had. She wiped away her tears, took a deep breath, and silently promised herself to never give up, no matter what life threw her way. If she had told the story of how she married a titan in a day with no better reason than love, they would clearly deem her mad. She had read enough of their existence to know that her new reality would be much different. She had told herself that if she could not have her present back, then she could live a future with Helios. She remains on the bed, pondering all that has happened to her so far, when suddenly there's an ominous light, and she starts to crawl back onto the bed. Ophelia hears a clap and falls into the ominous light. She feels herself falling through the air and starts to scream with her eyes closed. Human! An angry voice calls out. Ophelia opens her eyes. She is in a stadium surrounded by giants. She felt like an ant among men. Fear took over her mind. She hears Helios's voice and she turns around swiftly. She attempted to speak, but felt herself suffocating in the dense air as she opened her mouth. The voice speaks again. No human shall speak in front of the gods without permission. Helios looks up at the bearded man. Zeus. Helios screams, "What is this?" Zeus looks at Helios, ready to kill. He looks at Gaia, Odin, Poseidon, and in the stadium at a number of other gods not visible to Helios, who was chained to the ground. He could feel his parents' and sisters' presence. Zeus had commanded time to stop using the power of his father, Cronus, which he had stolen long ago. He called for a trail. The gods had sensed that the timeline had changed, a change that no one could ignore. Helios knew he was in serious trouble now. The fact that even his own family members were present among the spectators indicated the gravity of the situation. As the trial began, Zeus laid out the accusations against Helios, accusing him of attempting to manipulate time for his own benefit. The other gods murmured amongst themselves, shocked by the audacity of Helios's actions. But Helios showed no sign of guilt. He had done nothing wrong, so he had nothing to fear. Helios was accused of having slept with a human, something that was also against the law, that he was not yet guilty of. His only current crime was loving a human and marking her. That alone was not grounds for punishment. From a distance, Hermes approaches, and Helios' blood begins to boil. But he remembers that this was Hermes of the past, the mischievous Hermes that he has known for years. Hermes speaks with horror on his face. "That child is one of mine." The Titans scream in uproar. How can a child from the future be the child of Hermes, a god? I sense in that child the same energy that I exude, the same my children too carry. She is one of mine. Gaia shrinks to human size and grabs Ophelia by the chin. She is a descendant of your Hermes, and a wish granted by me. Gia speaks with a grin on her face. Ophelia looks horrified. Gia clicks her finger, and a cloud of smoke appears, revealing an image large enough for all to see. Ophelia sees her parents in the gust of smoke. The memory of their death is made clear for all to see. Ophelia's father runs to save a small girl with bleeding gray wings from the rubble of a mountain. Ophelia's mother holds her tightly. I was only 12. Ophelia whispers while watching the memories play. Her father starts to run with the young child towards Ophelia and her mother. A few steps away, a huge blackbird swoops down, and Ophelia's father throws the child to Ophelia's mother. He whispers inaudible words. He gets eaten by the bird, sacrificing himself to save the child. Ophelia's mother shields her from the gruesome scene, tears streaming down her face as she holds her daughter close. Ophelia and her mother scream in horror as she attempts to cover Ophelia's eyes while picking up the child. She makes a wish for the children to survive. The young child begins to turn into a gray, ashy stone. She crumbles in her arms, and Ophelia and her mother weep. She begs in desperation for someone to save her child. She gets up, telling Ophelia to stay. She runs to attract the bird far away. Ophelia watches in terror as her mother bravely sacrifices herself to save her. Tears stream down her face as she realizes the gravity of the situation. The bird swoops down on her mother, and Ophelia can only watch helplessly as her mother disappears into the bird's mouth. She is left alone, heartbroken, and filled with sorrow as she watches the bird fly away with her mother in its grasp. She falls to her knees, devastated by the loss of her family. I was only 12, Ophelia repeats, diverting her eyes from the gust of smoke. I granted the mother's wish for trying to save one of my own. I saved the child, but the child of Hermes also granted the daughter a wish. She wished for strength to save her family, and the child of Hermes gave her life force to grant that wish. Your own lives within her, Hermes. Ophelia's body shook with emotion as she recalled the events that led to her newfound strength. She felt a sense of determination swell within her, fueled by the sacrifice of the child of Hermes. With tears streaming down her face, she watches her younger self hide in confusion, waiting for dawn. Ophelia never knew that her wish was granted to her. Things were slowly beginning to make sense. Before Ophelia could come to her senses, Helios had broken free of his chains. He jumps towards her and grabs her from the reach of Gia. Glaring at Gia, Helios opens a portal, leaving everyone shocked. He jumps in with Ophelia in his arm. They both are now standing in a field of green by an apple tree. Helios puts Ophelia down, and as she reaches for an apple, Helios frantically stops her. Ophelia thinks for a moment and feels instantly stupid after remembering that a single apple brought about the downfall of humanity. Ophelia, I need you to look at me, Helios says, grabbing her in a tight hug. Ophelia begins to cry, looking Helios in the eyes. Helios pulls Ophelia into an even tighter hug. Ophelia kisses Helios, and he pulls away. You need to calm down first, Ophelia. No, Helios, I need a better memory. This is not how my wedding will end. Helios is taken back by her remark. He remembers that they had promised to be together forever. Helios kisses Ophelia's back. He begins to grab at her ass, and she moans at the shock of his hands squeezing tightly at her. Helios snaps his fingers, and a bed appears. Wait! Ophelia suddenly screams. We are not in the open. This is my realm. Look where the sun is, Helios replies, lifting Ophelia and grabbing her by the ass. She looks to see the sun alarmingly close, and before she can utter another word, Helios throws her on the bed. She sinks in, and Helios jumps on top, hovering over her. His intense gaze locked onto hers, filled with passion and desire. Ophelia's heart raced as she felt his lips press against hers, a fire igniting within her. The sun beat down on them, casting a golden glow over their entwined bodies. With a smile, Helios whispered, Let's create our own world right here, in the heart of the sun. And as they melted into each other's embrace, Ophelia blushed uncontrollably. Trust me, Ophelia. Helios takes off her top in one move and begins kissing her neck. He works his way to her stomach as Ophelia lets out faint moans. He struggles to take off her bra but manages after a second try. He tosses it across the bed, leaving Ophelia bare. He had seen Ophelia naked before, but in that moment, Helios could not control his wild thoughts. Ophelia takes off her jeans in a shimmy and tosses them next to her bra. Ophelia thought to herself that she was fully exposed now, vulnerable and open to Helios in a way she had never been before. Though she had willingly shown herself to him before, Ophelia felt slightly shy. She knew that this was not a dream she would wake up from. Helios gazed at her, admiration and desire evident in his eyes. He gently caressed her skin, sending shivers down her spine. Ophelia closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation of his touch. In that moment, Ophelia suddenly desired Helios in a way that she had never desired anything before. Was it his glowing skin? Or perhaps his abs that seemed rock hard? Or maybe it was his face that was clearly carved by the gods? Ophelia had never been interested in looks before, so she knew that her desires were not clouded by bias. She could not deny, however, that Helios really was a work of art. Helios starts to work his way lower down her body. He was clearly fascinated by her every reaction and movement. "I want to eat you, Ophelia," Helios says, out of breath from holding himself back. He kisses every inch of her body while Ophelia fights back her moans. "You can't run, Midnight." Helios smirks, pulling her by the legs towards him.